Rain slashed against the windshield of the battered sedan like handfuls of gravel thrown by an angry god, blurring the city lights into streaks of neon blood. Elias gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned the color of old parchment, his eyes darting between the slick road and the digital clock on the dashboard that seemed to mock him with every passing minute. 8:14 p.m. Instead, he was hydroplaning down Fifth Avenue, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribcage because of a small, blue plastic cylinder sitting on his desk on the 42nd floor, Toby's inhaler. The realization had hit him in the grocery store checkout line, a cold bucket of ice water down his spine that made him abandon a gallon of milk and sprint for the car. Steroid-based rescue inhaler Toby, needed for his bronchial flare-ups, was currently locked inside the fortress of Vantage Media. Elias cursed under his breath, a soft sound swallowed by the rhythmic thumping of the wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Vantage Media wasn't just a workplace. It was a high-altitude pressure chamber designed to squeeze coal into diamonds or crush it into dust. And presiding over that kingdom of glass and steel was Juliana Thorne. The name alone was enough to make junior analysts sweat through their dress shirts. She was the CEO who didn't walk. She glided, a shark in a St. Laurent blazer, cutting through the water without creating a ripple. Elias had worked for her for 3 years and had exchanged maybe 50 words with her. She was a rumor, a silhouette, a terrifying constant who viewed human error as a personal insult. He pulled into the underground garage, the tires squealing on the polished concrete as he navigated the labyrinth of reserved spots for luxury cars he would never afford. The garage was empty, save for a single vehicle parked in the spot marked CEO near the elevator bank. A matte black luxury sedan, sleek and predatory, sitting there like a dormant beast. Juliana Thorne didn't have a home. She had a charging station where she powered down for 4 hours before returning to terrorize the board of directors. The lanyard tangled with a stray Lego brick, a remnant of Toby's chaotic presence in every aspect of his life. The elevator ride up was a lesson in ear-popping velocity, the numbers on the display climbing higher and higher, leaving the damp, grounded world behind. When the doors slid open on the 42nd floor, the silence hit him harder than the noise of the storm outside. It was a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind that exists in museums after hours or in the deep ocean. The main floor was a sea of dark monitors and empty ergonomic chairs, the ghosts of the day's productivity lingering in the air-conditioned chill. Elias moved quickly, his sneakers squeaking on the marble floors, a sound that felt violently loud in the stillness, which was tucked away near the copy room, far enough from the corner office to avoid the eye of Sauron, but close enough to smell the fresh coffee brewed exclusively for the executive suite. He reached his desk, his breath hitching in his throat as he scanned the cluttered surface. Files? A half-empty coffee mug from this morning? A framed photo of Toby missing his 2 front teeth, there, tucked behind the monitor. The blue plastic casing caught the ambient light from the emergency exit sign. Panic flared again, hot and sharp, and he turned on his heel to sprint back to the elevators. That was when he heard it. It was a sound that didn't belong in the sterile ecosystem of Vantage Media. It wasn't the hum of the server room or the settling of the building's foundation. It was a ragged, gasping intake of breath, followed by a low, guttural noise that sounded like something breaking. Elias froze, 1 foot hovering in the air, his instincts warring with his common sense. Common sense screamed at him to run, to get back in the elevator and pretend he was never there. But the dad in him, the part of him attuned to the frequency of distress, pinned him to the spot. The sound came again, louder this time, drifting down the long, shadowed hallway that led to the executive suite. It was a sob. Not a polite, stifled cry of frustration, but a raw, ugly, heaving sound of absolute devastation. Elias turned his head slowly, looking toward the heavy double doors of Juliana Thorne's office. A sliver of golden light spilled out from beneath the mahogany, cutting across the dark carpet like a laser. He took a step toward it, then another, moving against his better judgment, drawn by the sheer impossibility of the sound. Juliana Thorne did not cry. Juliana Thorne made other people cry. He remembered the time she had dismantled the marketing director's entire quarterly strategy with 3 sentences and a raised eyebrow, leaving the man pale and trembling. He remembered the rumors that she had fired her own assistant on Christmas Eve for booking the wrong flight. This woman was made of Kevlar and ambition. She didn't have the capacity for this kind of vulnerability. And yet, as he crept closer, the sounds became undeniable. It sounded like someone drowning, fighting for air in a room devoid of oxygen. Elias reached the door, his heart thumping so hard he was sure it was audible in the hallway. The door was cracked open a fraction of an inch, just enough to break the seal of privacy. He shouldn't look. His career at Vantage Media would be over before the elevator hit the ground floor. But the sound shifted, turning into a low moan of such profound loneliness that it twisted something deep in Elias's gut. It was the sound of a human being reaching the absolute limit of what they could endure. He nudged the door with his fingertips. It swung inward silently, the heavy hinges well-oiled, revealing the sanctum of the CEO. The office was vast, dominated by a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the storm-lashed city below. But the commanding view was ignored. Juliana Thorne was not sitting in her high-backed leather chair, barking orders into a headset. She was on the floor. She was curled into a tight ball beneath the window, her knees pulled up to her chest, her forehead resting on her arms. The sight was so jarring, so completely at odds with reality that Elias's brain struggled to process it. Her blazer, a piece of clothing that probably cost more than Elias's car, was thrown haphazardly across a chair, one sleeve dragging on the floor. Her shoes, 4-inch stilettos that sounded like gunshots when she walked, were kicked off, lying on their sides like dead birds. Her hair, usually pulled back in a severe, geometric bun that defied gravity, was loose, cascading in a chaotic golden wave over her shoulders, tangled and messy. She looked small. That was the most terrifying part. Stripped of the power suit, the heels, and the posture of command, she looked impossibly small against the backdrop of the stormy city. Elias squinted, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the desk lamp. He saw the words custody and visitation and restraining order printed in bold, accusatory font. He saw a photograph lying face up near her hand, a picture of a little girl with Juliana's eyes, smiling in front of a birthday cake. The frame was cracked, as if it had been thrown. Juliana's shoulders shook with a violent tremor, a fresh wave of grief racking her body. "I can't," she whispered, the words choked and wet. "I can't do it." She wasn't talking to anyone. She was speaking to the empty room, to the universe that had seemingly turned its back on her. Elias felt a lump form in his throat. He knew that tone. He had heard it in his own voice, late at night in the kitchen, staring at a stack of medical bills and wondering how he was going to keep the lights on. It was the voice of a parent who had run out of miracles. He took a breath, the air tasting of ozone and expensive perfume. He could still leave. She hadn't seen him. He could back away, let the door close, and preserve the myth of the Ice Queen, but then he thought of Toby, waiting for him. He thought of the nights he had spent terrified he was failing his son, wishing someone would just tell him it was going to be okay. He looked at the woman on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her personal life, and saw the mirror image of his own fears. He wasn't an employee right now. The name hung in the air, soft but startling as a gunshot in a library. Juliana's head snapped up. The motion was feral, immediate, the reaction of a wounded animal cornered in its den. She scrambled backward, pushing herself up against the glass, her eyes wide and wild. Her face was unrecognizable. For a second, there was no recognition in her eyes, only pure, unadulterated panic. She looked at him, and then she looked down at herself, at the bare feet, the crumpled papers, the raw vulnerability on display. The mask slammed back into place, or at least she tried to force it. She wiped her face aggressively with the back of her hand, smearing the makeup further. "Who is that?" she snapped, though her voice cracked in the middle, ruining the effect. "It's Elias," he said, keeping his voice low and steady, the same tone he used when Toby woke up from a nightmare. "From analytics." She stared at him, her chest heaving, trying to assemble the scattered fragments of her dignity. "Get out," she hissed. It was a command, but it lacked the usual venom. It was brittle, fragile as glass. "Get out right now, or you're fired. You're done. Do you hear me?" She was shaking so hard her teeth were almost chattering. Elias didn't move. He stood his ground, hands open at his sides, showing her he wasn't a threat. I just came back from my son's inhaler, he said quietly. He held up the blue plastic tube as evidence. I didn't mean to intrude. Juliana laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that bordered on hysteria. Intrude? You just walked in on your CEO having a breakdown. You didn't intrude, Elias, you just witnessed a career suicide. She grabbed a piece of paper, crumpling it in her fist until her knuckles turned white. Go tell them, she spat, tears leaking from her eyes again despite her best efforts. Go tell the board, tell the gossip mill, tell them Juliana Thorne is weak. Tell them she's losing her mind. She squeezed her eyes shut, a fresh sob escaping her throat. Tell them I lost her, she whispered, the fight draining out of her as quickly as it had appeared. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Elias looked at the papers again. Petition for sole custody, granted, but not to her. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. She wasn't just working late, she was hiding. She was grieving the loss of a child who was still alive but out of reach. Elias took a step forward. Stay back, she warned, her eyes snapping open, flashing with defensive anger. I'm not going to tell anyone, Elias said, his voice firm. He walked over to the chair where her blazer lay and picked it up. He didn't hand it to her. That would be too formal. He just held it, a peace offering. I'm not going to the board, Miss Thorne. He looked her in the eye, ignoring the mess, the tears, the ruin. I'm a single dad, he said. I know what it looks like when the world is caving in. Juliana stared at him, the air leaving her lungs in a slow, shaky exhale. She looked at the blazer in his hands, then at his face. She was searching for pity, ready to attack it if she found it. But she didn't find pity. She found recognition. She slumped back against the glass, the energy leaving her body, leaving her hollow. I'm too tired for pity. I'm just ... here. He sat down. Not in the chair. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, about 5 feet away from her. It was a breach of protocol so severe it was almost comical. Juliana looked at him as if he had grown a second head. What are you doing? She asked, bewildered. My kid has asthma, Elias said, tapping the inhaler in his pocket. And he's afraid of thunderstorms. And I'm sitting on the floor of my boss's office because she looks like she needs a minute, and I have about 10 before my mom calls the police to report me missing. He looked out the window at the rain. You aren't weak, Miss Thorne. He turned his gaze back to her. You're just human, and honestly, it's the first time I've seen you look like part of the species. Juliana blinked, a single tear tracking through the smudge of mascara on her cheek. She looked at the photo of her daughter. Then she looked at Elias, really looked at him for the first time in 3 years. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't fearful anymore. It was the quiet before a different kind of storm. 10 minutes? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias nodded. 10 minutes. Juliana closed her eyes, and for a moment the Ice Queen was gone entirely. In her place was just a mother, sitting in the wreckage, looking for a hand to pull her out of the dark. The floor of the executive suite was colder than Elias expected. It was strange what the mind focused on during a crisis. Here he was, sitting cross-legged on imported Turkish wool in a suit he bought at an outlet mall, 3 feet away from a woman whose net worth could likely purchase his entire neighborhood. And all he could think about was the draft coming from the floor-to-ceiling window. Juliana Thorne had stopped crying, but the silence was worse. It was a jagged, brittle silence, the kind that follows a car crash before the sirens start. She was hugging her knees, her breathing hitching every few seconds in a sharp, involuntary spasm. The formidable armor of the CEO was gone, stripped away to reveal someone shockingly young and terrifyingly fragile. Elias kept his hands in his lap, trying to make himself take up as little space as possible. He knew he was trespassing on a moment of profound humiliation. In the corporate world, weakness was blood in the water, and Juliana had spent a decade making sure she never even suffered a paper cut in public. Now, she was bleeding out. He watched her eyes dart across the scattered papers. They were legal briefs, thick with staples and aggression. He could read the headers upside down from where he sat. Motion to modify custody. Affidavit of Richard Sterling. Psychological evaluation request. The words were weapons. Elias felt a phantom ache in his chest. He knew those words. He knew the suffocating weight of a system that turned parenthood into a performance review. You should go, Juliana said. Her voice was a ruin horse, flat and devoid of the melodic sharpness that usually terrified the boardroom. She didn't look at him. She was staring at a spot on the carpet where a tear had darkened the wool. "I can't," Elias said simply. "You can," she countered, a flash of her old fire sparking weakly. "You stand up. You walk to the elevator. You forget you saw this. That is a direct order." Elias shifted his weight, his knee popping audibly in the quiet room. "With all due respect, Miss Thorne, you're not my boss right now. You're just a person sitting on the floor in the dark. And my mom raised me better than to leave a person on the floor in the dark?" Juliana finally turned her head. Her eyes were swollen, the irises a piercing, watery blue that looked like shattered ice. She looked at him with a mixture of confusion and resentment. She wasn't used to insubordination, and she certainly wasn't used to kindness that didn't come with an invoice attached. "I don't even know your last name," she whispered. The admission seemed to hurt her. "Vance," he said. "Elias Vance. I've been in analytics for 3 years. I sit next to the guy who eats tuna sandwiches every day at 11 a.m. A tiny, hysterical huff of air escaped her lips. It might have been a laugh or a sob. "Gary," she said. "I've been meaning to fire him for the smell alone." "Please don't. He has twins in college." "I won't," she murmured, picking at a loose thread on the hem of her silk blouse. "I probably won't be here long enough to fire anyone." She reached out and picked up one of the documents, her hand trembling. It was the affidavit. She smoothed the crinkled paper against her thigh, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she were reading her own obituary. "Do you know what this says, Elias Vance?" He shook his head slightly, though he had a sinking feeling he could guess. "It says that I am pathologically ambitious," she read, her voice trembling with a toxic mix of rage and shame. "It says my devotion to Vantage Media constitutes emotional abandonment. It says that because I missed the spring recital to close the Tokyo merger, the merger that saved 400 jobs. By the way, I'm unfit to be a primary caregiver to my daughter." She looked up at him, her eyes pleading for a verdict. "I built this company for her. Everything I do, every late night, every missed dinner, it's to build a fortress around her so she never has to rely on anyone. And now, ... she choked on the word. "Now they're using the fortress to lock me out." Elias felt the air leave the room. He looked at the photo of the little girl again. She was about Toby's age, maybe a year older. She had a gap-toothed smile and was wearing a tiara made of plastic jewels. "Her name is Maya," Juliana said, following his gaze. "She's 7. She likes horses and hates math." "Toby is 6, Elias offered quietly. "He likes dinosaurs and hates wearing pants." Juliana's lips twitched. It was a microscopic victory. "How do you do it?" she asked, the question exploding out of her. "I see you leave, 5 p.m., every day. It used to annoy me, honestly. I used to look down from here and see you walking to the garage while I was dialing into a conference call." "I thought you lacked drive," Elias winced. He had always suspected the glare from the corner office wasn't just his imagination. "I don't lack drive," he said, his voice firming up. "I just have a different deadline. If I'm not at the after-school program by 5:30, they charge $1 a minute. And if I'm not home by 6 o'clock, the meltdown begins. It's not about not wanting to work, Miss Thorne. It's about the fact that Toby doesn't care about the Tokyo merger. He cares if I'm there to cut the crust off his toast." Juliana flinched as if he'd slapped her. She dropped the paper and buried her face in her hands. "I hired a chef to cut the crusts," she muffled into her palms. "I hired a nanny to read the stories. I hired a driver to do the school run. I thought I was winning. I thought I was providing." She looked up, her face streaked with fresh tears. "My ex-husband ... Richard, he didn't work. He lived off my bonus checks. He played golf and was present. And now the judge looks at him and sees the stable parent and looks at me and sees an ATM machine." The bitterness in her voice was acid. Elias shifted, leaning forward slightly. He understood the dynamic better than she realized. "It's not fair," he said. "But the court doesn't care about fair. They care about hours logged. It's a metrics game, Miss Thorne. You know, metrics." "I'm losing the metrics," she whispered. "My lawyer called tonight, that's why." She gestured vaguely to the chaos around her. "Richard is filing for full custody. He wants to move her to Connecticut. He says my lifestyle is toxic. He says I'm married to this building. She looked around the darkened office, the glass walls reflecting the storm. Maybe he's right. Look at me. It's Tuesday night. I'm eating cold pad thai on the floor. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 2 days because I was preparing for the board meeting. I have 4,000 employees, Elias. I have a global brand. I have a penthouse I've slept in maybe 10 times this year. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. I have everything and I have absolutely nothing. The confession hung heavy in the air. It was the truth that every workaholic ran from, the ghost that haunted the corridors of high-rises at midnight. Juliana Thorne, the titan of industry, was just a lonely woman in a glass tower. Elias checked his watch instinctively, then stopped himself. He couldn't leave. Not now? When was the last time you just dong out with her? Elias asked. No nannies, no drivers, just you and Maya. Juliana frowned, her brow furrowing as she searched her memory. The seconds ticked by, stretching into an uncomfortable silence. The realization dawned on her face slowly, a dawning horror. September, she whispered. Her birthday, but... My assistant planned the party. I was on the phone for half of it. She looked at Elias with wide, panicked eyes. Oh my God, I don't know her. I know her schedule. I know her allergies. I know her shoe size, but I don't know her. She grabbed a handful of her own hair, pulling it tight. I'm going to lose her, Elias. I'm going to lose her to a man who never worked a day in his life. And she's going to grow up thinking her mother loved a spreadsheet more than her. So, change the narrative? Elias said. It wasn't an analyst speaking. It was a father who had fought for his own scraps of time. Juliana looked at him blankly. What? Change the narrative, he repeated. You're the CEO, you spin bad quarterly earnings into restructuring opportunities. You turn PR disasters into learning moments. Why are you letting your ex-husband write the press release on your life? She stared at him, her mouth slightly open. The gears in her mind, usually so well oiled, were grinding against the rust of her despair. I can't just quit, she said. If I step down the stock tanks, the board will eat me alive. I have a fiduciary duty. Screw the fiduciary duty, Elias said, the profanity feeling strange in the sterile office. We're talking about your kid. You don't have to quit. You just have to stop being the person Richard says you are. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He swiped through the cracked screen until he found a video. He turned it around and showed it to her. It was a shaky video taken in a messy kitchen. Toby was sitting at a table covered in flour, his face a mask of white powder, holding up a lopsided, burnt cookie. He was laughing, a pure, unadulterated sound of joy. That was last Tuesday, Elias said. I left work early. I told my manager I had a dental emergency. I didn't. I went home and we made terrible cookies. I lost 3 hours of pay for that. And it was the best investment I made all year. Juliana watched the video, mesmerized. She watched the way Toby looked at the camera, looked at Elias with total adoration. I don't know how to do that, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know how to be messy. I don't know how to be unstructured. My life is a calendar invite. Then send her an invite, Elias said. But not for an orchestrated event, just be there. Juliana looked down at her hands. The nails were manicured to perfection, a sharp, glossy red. They looked like claws. She suddenly hated them. He's coming for the Christmas visit, she said, her voice hollow. Richard! He's dropping her off on Christmas Eve for 4 hours. 4 hours. That's all the judge gave me. Because I'm unpredictable. He's going to be waiting in the car outside the penthouse to take her back. She looked up at Elias, and the desperation in her eyes was a physical force. I don't know what to do with 4 hours, Elias. I usually buy her a mountain of presents. I get the newest iPad, the biggest dollhouse. I try to buy her affection because I don't have the time to earn it. And she opens them and she says thank you, and she looks at the door. She took a ragged breath. I'm terrified. I'm terrified that on Christmas Eve, she's going to look at me and see a stranger. And if that happens, if I see that look in her eyes, I think I'll break. Elias looked at the woman who signed his paychecks. He saw the terror of a parent who realizes that love isn't enough if you aren't there to give it. He thought of Toby waiting at his grandmother's. He thought of the inhaler in his pocket. He thought of the strict boundary he kept between his work life and his real life. And then he took a sledgehammer to that boundary. You don't need iPads, Elias said softly. And you don't need a dollhouse. You need a tradition. I don't have any traditions, she said bitterly. My tradition is ordering sushi and reviewing year-end projections. Then borrow one of mine, he said. Juliana looked at him, confused. What? Elias leaned back against the desk leg, looking her square in the eye. Every Christmas Eve, Toby and I build a fort, not a pillow fort, a serious engineering project. We use every sheet in the house, we use the sofa cushions, we string lights up inside. We crawl in there with a flashlight and we read books until he falls asleep. No screens. No noise, just us, inside our own little world. Juliana stared at him. The image seemed to baffle her. You build a ... tent in your living room? It's a fortress, Elias corrected with a smile. A fortress against the world. But it's soft and it's safe. He saw a flicker of something in her eyes. A longing, a hunger for something that's simple, that achievable. I can't do that, she said, looking around the expansive office. I live in a museum. Everything is white. Everything is glass, so make a mess, Elias challenged. Miss Thorne, you run $1 billion company. Are you telling me you can't figure out how to drape a sheet over a couple of chairs? She looked at him, and for the first time, the corner of her mouth lifted. It wasn't a smile, not really, but it was a break in the clouds. You're very impertinent, Vance. I'm off the clock, he shrugged. And you're crying on the floor. I think the hierarchy is suspended for the night. She took a deep breath, wiping the last of the tears from her cheeks. She looked at the custody papers again, but this time she didn't look defeated. She looked calculating. The gears were turning again, but in a different direction. 4 hours, she murmured. Fortress. She looked back at Elias. The intensity was back in her gaze, but it wasn't cold anymore. It was searingly, uncomfortably personal. You're a father, she said, stating it like a fact she had just discovered. A real one, not a donor, not a weekend visitor. I try to be, he said. I need you to teach me, she said. The request was so quiet Elias almost missed it. Teach you what? How to be a parent who isn't a CEO, she said. I need you to tell me what to do. Not strategically, logistically. I need a crash course in whatever it is you do that makes your son look at you like that. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his. Don't report me to the board, she repeated the plea from earlier, but now it had a different weight. Don't tell them I'm unstable, just ... stay. Stay for 10 minutes. Stay for an hour, I don't care. Just tell me how you survived the first year alone without losing your mind or your soul. Elias felt the weight of the request. She wasn't asking for overtime. She was asking for a lifeline. He thought of his mom, who was probably pacing the floor. He thought of Toby, who needed his inhaler. He pulled his phone out. I have to make a call, he said. Juliana's face fell. The rejection was instant in her eyes. She pulled back, her walls slamming up. Of course, you have a life. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I have to call my mom, Elias interrupted, and tell her I'm going to be late. And I have to tell her to give Toby a puff of her spare inhaler because I am going to be stuck at the office for a while. Juliana froze. She looked at him, her lips parted. You're staying? You asked for a crash course, Elias said, settling back onto the floor and loosening his tie. Consulting fees are usually high, but since you didn't fire Gary, I'll give you the friends and family rate. He pointed to the takeout carton near her elbow. First lesson, he said. If you're going to survive single parenthood, you have to actually eat. Pass the pad thai. Juliana looked at the carton, then at Elias. A strange, shuddering breath escaped her, and then, for the first time that night, she smiled. It was a real smile, crooked and wet and entirely human. She slid the carton across the carpet. It's cold, she warned. Cold dinner is a staple of the lifestyle, Elias said, popping the top. Welcome to the club, boss. The pad thai was cold, the noodles congealed into a brick of spicy, peanut-scented carbohydrates, but Juliana Thorne ate it with the mechanical determination of a woman who had It was a surreal tableau, a scene that felt like a glitch in the simulation of his life. The most powerful woman in media, the Ice Queen, who could freeze a boardroom with a single arched eyebrow, was sitting cross-legged in her stocking feet, wrestling a piece of tofu with a plastic fork, a smudge of sauce on her chin. The storm outside had settled into a steady, rhythmic drumming against the glass, turning the city lights into a blurred watercolor painting. Inside, the silence was no longer heavy. It was tentative, like the quiet between two soldiers in a foxhole who had just realized they were fighting on the same side. "I have a penthouse on Park Avenue," Juliana said suddenly, breaking the silence. She didn't look up from her food. "It has 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, and a view of the park that cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. It has heated floors and a smart system that adjusts the lighting based on my circadian rhythm." She finally looked up, her eyes hauntingly empty. "And it is the loudest place on earth." Elias set his carton down on a stack of legal briefs. "Loud? The silence," she clarified. "It rings. When I go home, I don't hear laughter. I don't hear cartoons. I hear the hum of the refrigerator and the sound of my own thoughts echoing off marble countertops. It's a 4000 Ultra HD life, Elias, crystal clear, perfectly curated, and completely, utterly cold." She gestured around the office, encompassing the awards on the shelf, the sleek furniture, the empire she had built. "I built all of this because I thought security meant money. I thought if I could give Maya the best schools, the best clothes, the best connections, I was being a good mother. I treated her childhood like a startup. I optimized it." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I optimized myself right out of the equation." Elias leaned back on his hands, the coarse carpet scratching his palms. He knew that trap. He knew the seductive lie that said providing for a child was the same as being with a child. "You were trying to protect her," Elias said gently. "That's not a crime, it's just the wrong strategy." "Strategy," she repeated the word, tasting it. "I'm good at strategy. I'm good at hostile takeovers and market penetration. But this is a hostile takeover of my own heart, and I don't have a defense." She pushed the food away, her appetite vanishing as quickly as it had arrived. She pulled her knees up to her chest again, wrapping her arms around them in a gesture of self-protection. "You said earlier that I needed to change the narrative," she said, her gaze locking onto his. "You said I needed to stop letting Richard write the press release. But I don't know the new script, Elias. I don't know the lines." She took a deep breath, the air trembling in her lungs. "Tell me about the first year," she said, "when you were alone. When it was just you and Toby. Don't give me the HR version. Don't give me the "it was challenging but rewarding" speech. Tell me the truth. Tell me how you didn't shatter." Elias looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the desperation etched into the fine lines around her eyes. She wasn't asking for pity. She was asking for a map. He thought back to those first few months. The blur of sleepless nights, the crushing weight of responsibility, the terrifying realization that there was no backup coming. "I did shatter," Elias admitted quietly. Juliana blinked, surprised. "I shattered about once a week," he continued. "I remember one night Toby was 2. He had a fever, he wouldn't stop crying, and the washing machine had just flooded the kitchen. I sat on the wet floor, in a puddle of soapy water, and I just wept. I cried because I was tired. I cried because I missed his mom. I cried because I didn't know how to fix the washing machine, and I didn't know how to fix his fever." He saw Juliana flinch, a flash of recognition in her eyes. "But here's the thing," Elias said, leaning forward. "Toby didn't care about the floor. He didn't care about the water. He just crawled into my lap. He put his little hot hand on my face and he fell asleep. Because I was there. I was a mess, but I was his mess." "I'm afraid," Juliana whispered. "I'm afraid that if I let Maya see the mess, she'll lose respect for me. I'm her mother. I'm supposed to be strong. I'm supposed to be the rock." "Kids don't need a rock," Elias said firmly. "Rocks are hard, rocks are cold. Kids need a harbor. They need a place where it's safe to dock when the water gets rough. And sometimes a harbor is messy. It has barnacles and seaweed and broken nets, but it's safe." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again, scrolling past the picture of the cookies to a different image. It was a photo of a pillow fort, a chaotic, structural nightmare of couch cushions, blankets, and dining chairs. This is the Fortress of Solitude, Elias said, showing her the screen. We built this last Christmas. It took 3 hours. It collapsed twice. It looked like a natural disaster in my living room. Juliana peered at the small screen. It looks ... cozy. It was, Elias said. We spent the entire night in there. We ate popcorn for dinner. We read comic books. I didn't check my email once. And you know what Toby remembers about last Christmas? He doesn't remember the expensive Lego set I bought him that took me 3 months to save for. He remembers the fort. He put the phone away. You have 4 hours on Christmas Eve, Elias said. Richard is betting on you trying to impress her. He's betting on you dragging her to a fancy dinner where she has to wear a stiff dress and use the right fork. He's betting on you buying her affection with a mountain of gifts she'll forget in a week. He expects the CEO. Juliana nodded slowly. He's right. That's exactly what I was planning. I have a reservation at Le Bernardin. I have a personal shopper pulling items at Saks. Cancel it, Elias said. All of it. All of it. All of it. But ... what do we do? Panic flared in her eyes again. If we don't go out, if we don't have the gifts, what do we do for 4 hours in an empty penthouse? You play, Elias said. I don't know how to play, she confessed, her voice thick with shame. I don't have an imagination, Elias. I deal in facts. I deal in projections. I can't just ... pretend. You don't have to pretend, Elias said. You just have to be present. You have to get on the floor. He gestured to the space between them. Like this. You get on the floor and you let her lead. If she wants to play dolls, you play dolls. And you don't check your phone. You don't take a call from Tokyo. You don't think about the merger. For 4 hours, you are not the CEO of Vantage Media. You are Maya's mom. And that is the only title that matters. Juliana looked down at her hands. She twisted the diamond ring on her right hand, the stone catching the dim light. You make it sound so simple, she said. It is simple, Elias replied. It's just not easy. It's the hardest work you'll ever do. It's harder than this job. Because in this job, if you fail, you lose money. In that job, if you fail, you lose a piece of their heart. The weight of his words hung in the air. Juliana seemed to shrink under them, and then, slowly, she seemed to expand, filling with a new kind of resolve. I can't do it alone, she said. The words were quiet, barely audible over the rain. You're not alone, Elias said. You have a staff of thousands. No, she shook her head violently. I have employees. I have subordinates. I have sharks waiting for blood in the water. I don't have ... Elias, not like this. She looked at him then, her blue eyes piercing through the gloom. Elias, you didn't just walk in here to get an inhaler. You walked in here and you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. You saw me at my absolute worst and you didn't run, you didn't use it against me. She took a breath, steeling herself. I need you to help me, not just tonight. I need you to help me prepare for Christmas Eve. Elias hesitated. Miss Thorne, I'm an analyst. I look at spreadsheets. I don't do ... life coaching. I don't need a life coach, she said sharply. I have 3 of those. They tell me to breathe and visualize my success. I don't need visualization. I need logistics. I need a tactical plan for being a mother. She reached for a notepad and a pen from the floor. Her hand was steady now. The CEO was back, but she was directing her energy toward a different target. I want to hire you, she said, as a consultant, a personal consultant. Your job is to teach me the single-parent survival guide, chapter and verse. You can't hire me to be your dad friend, Elias said, a nervous chuckle escaping him. HR would have a field day. Forget HR, she waved a hand dismissively. I am HR, I am the company, and this is a request from the top. She began to write on the pad, the pen scratching loudly. Objective. Reclaim connection with Maya. Timeline. 8 days until Christmas Eve. Strategy. The fortress. She looked up at him. I need you to tell me exactly what to buy, not from Saks, from ... wherever you shop. I need you to tell me what snacks to get. I need you to tell me what books to read. I need you to walk me through every minute of those 4 hours so that when Richard drops her off, I don't freeze. Elias looked at the list. It was absurd. It was touching. It was the most Juliana Thorne thing she could possibly do, trying to project manage intimacy. But as he looked at her, he saw the terrified woman beneath the strategy. He saw a mother who was drowning and reaching for the only lifeline she could see. "I can't take money for this," Elias said. "Then what?" she asked. "What do you want? A promotion? A raise? Name it." "I want you to promise me something," Elias said. "Anything. I want you to promise me that when you're in that fort with her, you'll leave your phone in the other room. Locked in a safe if you have to." Juliana swallowed hard. The thought of being disconnected was physically painful for her, but she nodded. "I promise." "And one more thing," Elias added. "I want you to stop calling yourself a failure. You're learning a new job. You're an intern again. Be kind to the intern." Juliana's eyes softened. A genuine emotion, raw and unguarded, passed over her face. "Okay," she whispered. "Be kind to the intern." She ripped the page off the notepad and handed it to him. "This is our contract," she said. "We start tomorrow. You come up here, lunch. We plan the menu, we plan the architecture of the fort. We plan the playlist." Elias took the paper. It felt heavy in his hand. "And tonight?" he asked. "Tonight," she said, looking around the wreckage of her office. "I'm going to go home. I'm going to clean the mascara off my face. And I'm going to call my daughter, just to say goodnight. No interrogation about school. No guilt trips, just ... night." "That's a good start," Elias said. He stood up, his knees cracking again. He offered a hand to her. For a second, she stared at his open palm. It was a breach of every unspoken rule of their corporate existence. But she reached up and took it. Her hand was small and cold in his, but her grip was strong. He pulled her to her feet. She wobbled slightly, balancing without her heels, and he steadied her by the elbow. They stood there for a moment, close enough to smell the rain on each other's clothes. The barrier between boss and employee dissolved by the shared vulnerability of the night. "Thank you, Elias," she said. It wasn't the dismissive "thank you" she gave to waiters, it was heavy with gratitude. "Go home to Toby," she said. "He needs his inhaler and his dad." "See you tomorrow, boss," Elias said. "See you tomorrow, Elias," she replied. As he walked to the elevator, he looked back once. Juliana was standing by the window, looking out at the city. She wasn't crying anymore. She was holding her phone, dialing a number, her posture straight, her head high. She looked like a warrior preparing for battle. But this time she was fighting for the right things. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing Elias back into his own world. But the air in the car felt different, lighter. He touched the paper in his pocket. Strategy, the fortress. He smiled. It was going to be an interesting week. The following week at Vantage Media was, by all external metrics, business as usual. The stock held steady, the Tokyo merger moved into its final phase, and the coffee in the break room remained indistinguishably burnt. But inside the 42nd floor corner office, a covert operation was underway. It happened during lunch hours. Every day at 12:15 p.m., Elias would slip past the administrative assistants, carrying not a stack of spreadsheets, but a brown paper bag filled with items that had no business in a Fortune 500 headquarters. On Tuesday, it was a box of tangled Christmas lights that smelled faintly of an attic. On Wednesday, it was a bag of marshmallows and a specific brand of cheap, powdered hot cocoa mix. On Thursday, it was a hand-drawn blueprint, scribbled in crayon by a 6-year-old consultant named Toby, detailing the structural load-bearing requirements of a sofa cushion fortress. Juliana Thorne attacked the project with the same ferocious intensity she applied to hostile takeovers. She cleared her massive mahogany desk, pushing aside millions of dollars in contracts to lay out Toby's crayon schematics. "The structural integrity seems questionable," she noted on Thursday, tapping a purple line on the paper with her Mont Blanc pen. "If we use the dining chairs as the primary supports, won't the blanket sag in the middle? We need a central pillar." Elias sat opposite her, unwrapping a turkey sandwich. "It's a blanket fort, Miss Thorne, not the Guggenheim. The sag is part of the aesthetic. It creates a cozy, cave-like atmosphere. If it's too perfect, it feels like a hotel." Juliana frowned, making a note in her leather-bound planner. Note: allow for structural imperfection. Aesthetic, cave-like. And the lighting, she continued, looking at the tangled ball of wires Elias had brought. I have smart bulbs in the penthouse. I can program them to a warm amber hue. No, Elias said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Use the cheap string lights. You have to tape them to the ceiling of the fort with scotch tape. The battery pack will probably fall on your head at least once. That's a feature, not a bug. It makes them laugh. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of mockery. There was none. He was deadly serious. To Elias, this wasn't a game. It was a rescue mission. You're sure? She asked, her voice dropping to that rare, vulnerable register she only used with him. Richard is dropping her off at 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I have until 8 p.m. That's 240 minutes. If the lights fall and she cries ... If the lights fall, you laugh, Elias corrected. You say, oops, the roof is leaking light, and you ask her to help you fix it. You make her part of the solution, not just an audience member to your perfection. Juliana nodded slowly, absorbing the philosophy. It went against every instinct she had honed in 20 years of corporate warfare. In her world, you never showed a mistake. In Elias's world, the mistake was the point of connection. Friday came, the last day before the holiday break. The office was buzzing with the manic energy of people anticipating time off. At 5 p.m., Elias packed his bag, ready to head home to Toby and the chaos of Christmas Eve preparations. He stopped by Juliana's office one last time. She was standing by the window, looking out at the snow that had started to fall over the city. She wasn't wearing her blazer. She looked smaller, softer. Ready for the merger? Elias asked from the doorway. She turned, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals, Elias. I've testified before Congress, but I have never been this terrified. You have the supplies? Yes, the sheets are washed, the cushions are staged. The cocoa is the powder kind, she grimaced slightly. I feel like a fraud. You're not a fraud, Elias said. You're a mom. It's the only job where you're allowed to learn as you go. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped box. It wasn't fancy, just drugstore wrapping paper. For the fort, he said, placing it on her desk. Open it with Maya. Juliana looked at the box, then at him. Elias, I didn't get you. Go, he smiled. Execute the plan. See you on the other side? Christmas Eve at the Thorne penthouse was usually a silent affair, a display of taste and wealth that felt more like a gallery opening than a home. But this year, the living room looked like a bomb had gone off in a linen factory. Juliana stood in the center of the room. Wearing a pair of cashmere sweatpants and an oversized sweater clothes she had bought specifically for this day, tearing the tags off with trembling hands. She had moved the Italian leather sofas. She had draped her grandmother's antique quilt over 2 dining chairs. She had used duct tape, actual silver duct tape, to secure a sheet to the back of the television stand. It looked ridiculous, it looked messy, it looked wonderful. The intercom buzzed at 4 p.m. exactly. Mr. Sterling is here, the doorman's voice crackled. Juliana took a deep breath. She checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. No makeup, hair in a loose ponytail. She looked like a stranger to herself. When the elevator doors opened, Richard stood there, impeccable in a wool coat, holding the hand of a small girl in a stiff velvet dress. Maya looked like a miniature version of the old Juliana, perfect, polished, and utterly terrified. Richard scanned the room, his eyes widening as he took in the chaotic heap of blankets in the center of the pristine living room. He looked at Juliana's sweatpants. A sneer tugged at the corner of his mouth. A bit unhinged, isn't it, Jules? He said coolly. Did the maid quit? Juliana felt the old reflex to snap back, to defend her dignity with a sharp barb. But she looked at Maya. The little girl was staring at the blanket heap, her eyes wide. No, Juliana said, her voice steady. We're doing renovations. Architectural ones? She knelt down, ignoring the pop of her knees, bringing herself to Maya's eye level. Hi, Bug, she whispered. Maya hesitated, glancing up at her father for permission. Richard gave a stiff nod. I'll be back at 8 sharp. Don't overwhelm her, Juliana. She needs stability, not your manic episodes. With that, he turned on his heel, the elevator doors sliding shut on his judgment. The silence that followed was thick. Maya stood by the door, clutching a small doll, looking at her mother like she was a dangerous animal. "I didn't buy you an iPad," Juliana blurted out. It was off script, but the panic was rising. Maya blinked. "Okay, and I didn't get the dollhouse. Okay." Juliana took a breath. The plan, stick to the plan. "I'd built a fortress, but the engineering is a little suspect. I think I need a consultant to help me test the structural integrity." She pointed to the heap of blankets. "It has lights inside. And snacks, but no grown-ups allowed, that's the rule." Maya looked at the fort. She looked at the duct tape. Then she looked at her mother. "You're wearing sweatpants," Maya said, the observation quiet and confused. "I am," Juliana admitted. "They're very soft. Do you want to touch them?" Maya took a tentative step forward, reaching out a small hand to brush the cashmere. "Soft," she agreed. "The inside of the fort is softer," Juliana promised. "Come on." She didn't lead Maya, she didn't direct her. She simply turned, got on her hands and knees, and crawled into the tunnel of blankets she had constructed. It was undignified, it was absurd. And as she crawled into the dim, amber-lit space, she prayed. For 10 seconds, she sat alone in the fort, her heart hammering against her ribs. The smell of the cheap cocoa powder she had spilled earlier lingered in the air. Then the flap of the blanket lifted, a velvet dress rustled. Small patent leather shoes kicked off, and Maya crawled in. The space was small, forcing them close. The string lights, taped haphazardly to the ceiling, cast a warm, irregular glow. It was a world away from the cold glass of the windows outside. "It's small," Maya whispered, looking around. "It's cozy," Juliana corrected, handing her a bowl of popcorn. "We're safe here. The storm can't get us." Maya took a piece of popcorn. She chewed slowly, her eyes scanning the space. Then her gaze landed on the small wrapped box Elias had given Juliana. "What's that?" "I don't know," Juliana admitted. "A friend gave it to me. He said we should open it together." Maya reached for the box. She tore the paper with a ferocity that surprised Juliana. Inside was a simple deck of cards and a note. Juliana picked up the note. It was in Elias's handwriting. "For war, the card game, not the lifestyle. Ace is high, have fun," Juliana laughed. It was a wet, choking sound that made Maya look up. "Do you know how to play war?" Juliana asked, wiping her eyes. "Daddy says cards are for gambling," Maya recited. "Well," Juliana said, shuffling the deck clumsily, "Daddy isn't in the fort. In the fort, cards are for fighting battles without anyone getting hurt." They played. For the first 20 minutes, it was stiff. Maya was polite, saying thank you every time she won a hand. But slowly, the magic of the enclosed space began to work. The popcorn bowl emptied. The velvet dress got crumpled. The breakthrough happened at 6:15 p.m. Juliana shifted her weight, and her elbow knocked against the main support chair. The heavy dictionary she had used as a counterweight slid off, and the entire left side of the roof collapsed, burying them both in a cascade of Egyptian cotton sheets. Juliana froze. This was the failure. This was the moment the chaos took over. She braced herself for tears. She waited for Maya to scream. Instead, from under the pile of sheets, she heard a sound she hadn't heard in years. A giggle. It started small, a bubbling sound, and then it erupted into a full, belly-shaking laugh. Maya emerged from the wreckage, her hair full of static, the string lights draped over her ear like a crooked tiara. "You broke the house," Maya squealed, pointing an accusatory finger at the CEO of Vantage Media. Juliana looked at the ruin of her hard work. She looked at her daughter's shining eyes. And Juliana Thorne threw her head back and roared with laughter. "I did," she gasped. "I'm a terrible architect." "You're going to have to fire me." "You're fired," Maya yelled, throwing a pillow at her. "I'm fired? Fine. Then I'm taking the marshmallows with me." "No!" Maya lunged for the bag, tackling her mother. They wrestled in the ruins of the fort, a tangle of limbs and laughter. For the first time, Juliana wasn't worried about the time. She wasn't worried about the mess. She was just a body, a source of warmth, a mother being climbed on by her child. They spent the rest of the night rebuilding. They made the fort stronger. They drank the watery cocoa, and Maya told her about a boy at school who ate paste, and Juliana told her about Gary and the tuna sandwiches. They didn't talk about the divorce. They didn't talk about the custody schedule. They just existed in the same space on the same frequency. At 7:55 p.m., the intercom buzzed. The sound was like a physical blow. The spell broke. The real world was intruding. Maya went still. The light left her eyes, replaced by the guarded look she wore for the world. "Daddy's here," she whispered. Juliana felt a surge of panic, a desperate desire to barricade the door. But she remembered Elias's words, "A harbor is safe." "It's okay," Juliana said, smoothing Maya's hair. "We had a good meeting, very productive." Maya looked at her, confusion warring with hope. Can we have another meeting?" Juliana felt her heart stop, then restart with a rhythm that felt entirely new. "Yes," she said fiercely. "We have a standing appointment, every time you come here. The fort waits for you." When Richard came up, he found them standing by the door. The living room was a disaster zone. There was popcorn on the Persian rug. The sheets were still draped over the chairs. Richard looked at the mess, his nose wrinkling. He opened his mouth to make a comment about the state of the apartment. But then he looked at Maya. She wasn't pale and withdrawn. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair was messy, and she was holding Juliana's hand, gripping it tight. "Ready to go, Maya?" Richard asked, his voice losing some of its edge. Maya looked up at Juliana. "Mommy is a bad architect," she told her father seriously. Juliana smiled, a genuine, tired, radiant smile. "I'm learning, though." Richard looked between them. He saw something he hadn't seen in a decade. He saw a mother who wasn't performing. He saw a woman who didn't care that her living room looked like a slumber party gone wrong. He didn't say anything snide. He just nodded, a strange, bewildered expression crossing his face. "Okay," he said, "coat on, Maya." As they walked to the elevator, Maya turned back. She didn't wave. She just looked at the pile of blankets. "Don't clean it up," she commanded. "I won't," Juliana promised. "I'll leave the lights on." The first week of January, Elias returned to the office. The holiday break had been good. Toby had gotten over his cold, and they had built a snow fort in the park that rivaled anything in architectural history. The office felt different. The air was lighter. The silence wasn't as oppressive. When he got to his desk, he saw the memo. It had been sent out company-wide that morning. To all staff from Office of the CEO Life Logistics Policy Update. Effective immediately, Vantage Media is implementing a new flexible hours initiative. Core hours will be 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Outside of these hours, results matter more than presence. Additionally, the unused conference room on the 42nd floor will be converted into an emergency childcare drop-in center for days when schools are closed or childcare falls through. It will be stocked with snacks and blocks. We build things here. That includes families. J. Thorne Elias read the memo twice. He felt a smile tugging at his lips, a warm feeling spreading through his chest. He looked up toward the corner office. The blinds were open. Juliana was there. She was on a call, wearing her blazer, looking every inch the titan of industry. But as Elias watched, she swiveled her chair. She saw him. She didn't wave. That wasn't her style. Instead, she held up a hand, her fingers forming a small, subtle shape, a roof, a triangle. "A fort," Elias nodded, returning the gesture. Later that afternoon, he found a yellow sticky note attached to his monitor. It was written in the sharp, angular script of a woman who signed million-dollar checks, but the message was simple. "Toby is welcome at the Christmas party next year. And thank you for the 10 minutes. They saved me. P.S. The structural integrity held, just barely." Elias peeled the note off and stuck it to the frame of Toby's picture. He looked at the inhaler sitting on his desk, then back at the glass office. The Ice Queen had melted, and in her place something much stronger had been built.